story is just one of those incredible, almost unbelievable transformations. I mean, this is a guy who went from being a hunted fugitive, literally hiding out in caves, to becoming the powerful king who would finally pull a fractured nation together. Today, we're going to break down exactly how he did it. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Because David's journey isn't just some ancient tale. It's practically a masterclass in leadership, in strategy, and in faith. So let's unpack how he managed to build a kingdom basically from scratch. All right, so our story kicks off at this huge turning point. After years of civil war, years of division, the elders from all the tribes of Israel, all of them, finally come to David. The nation is finally ready for one king. But you have to understand, this was not an overnight success story. Not at all. David's path to the throne was incredibly long and gradual. Think about it. He was first anointed as just a boy by the prophet Samuel. Then he was anointed as king over just his own tribe, Judah. And only now, finally, is he anointed as king over all of Israel. This was a destiny that was literally decades in the making. And his reign was a marathon, not a sprint. He officially becomes king at 30 years old, and he spends the first 7.5 years just solidifying his rule over Judah from the city of Hebron. It's only after that that he spends the next 33 years ruling a completely united kingdom from a brand new capital, Jerusalem. All told, he's on the throne for 4 decades. So what's your first move when you become king of a newly unified nation? Well, you need a capital city. And not just any city. You need one that's neutral, central, and most importantly, defensible. David sets his sights on the perfect target, the fortress of Jerusalem. There was just one tiny problem. The Jebusites, who held Jerusalem, were convinced their city was completely unconquerable. I mean, it was a natural fortress surrounded by these deep valleys. They were so confident that they literally stood on the walls and mocked David's army, basically saying he couldn't touch them. But David finds a way. In a pretty stunning move, his men actually scale the sheer rock walls and take the fortress. Right away, he renames it the City of David and makes it his capital. And this move was so significant, it got international attention. King Hiram of Tyre, a major power player, actually sends cedar logs and skilled craftsmen to build David a royal palace. Okay, so the capital is secured, but now David has to defend his new kingdom from his old enemies. And sure enough, the Philistines hear he's been crowned king over everyone, and they immediately attack. But the way David handles this reveals everything about his leadership style. So the Philistines attack twice, and what's so fascinating is how David responds. Both times before he does anything, he asks God for a battle plan. The first time, the command is clear, a direct head-on attack, and it results in a massive victory. But when they attack a second time, the instruction is completely different. Don't attack head-on, circle around behind them and set an ambush. David follows that new plan, and he wins again. And this just shows you, David didn't just rely on his own military genius. His real superpower was seeking guidance and then having the guts to actually follow it, no matter how unconventional it seemed. He was a king who prayed before he went to war. So, with a kingdom politically unified and militarily secure, David turns his attention to its spiritual heart. He wants to make Jerusalem not just the political capital, but the undisputed religious center of the entire nation. And to do that, he knew he had to bring home the single most sacred object in all of Israel, the Ark of the Covenant. This was believed to be the earthly throne of God himself, the ultimate symbol of his presence. And David knew it belonged in his new capital city. But his first attempt to move it is an absolute disaster. See, instead of having priests carry it on poles like the law prescribed, they put it on a brand new cart pulled by oxen. When the oxen stumble, a man named Uzzah instinctively reaches out to steady the ark, and he dies on the spot. This event absolutely terrifies David, and he just abandons the whole mission, leaving the ark at a nearby house. Now, to really get why David was so scared, you have to appreciate the ark's history. This wasn't just some religious artifact. It had been on an unbelievable 400-year journey, created at Mount Sinai, carried through the wilderness, settled in the Promised Land. It was even captured by enemies for a while before sitting in relative obscurity for 70 years. This thing was steeped in history and reverence. Getting this right was a big deal. So, David learns his lesson, a hard one. 3 months later, he tries again, but this time he does it by the book. And the contrast is just stunning. Where the first attempt, the wrong way, brought fear and death, The second attempt, the right way, carried on poles by priests and marked by sacrifice, brought nothing but overwhelming joy. And who's leading this massive, joyous celebration? The king himself. But he's stripped off his royal robes. He's wearing a simple linen ephod, the kind of garment a priest would wear. And he is celebrating with complete, uninhibited joy, dancing with everything he has as the Ark of the Covenant finally enters Jerusalem. But here's the thing, not everyone shares his joy. This incredible moment of national triumph actually leads to a really personal conflict, one that shows two totally different ways of looking at the world. As David is celebrating in the streets, his wife Michal, who was the daughter of the former king Saul, is watching him from a palace window. And as she sees her husband, the king, dancing like that among the common people, she's not proud. She's filled with contempt. She despised him in her heart. So when she confronts him later, basically accusing him of embarrassing himself and the crown, David's response is just powerful. He declares that his worship wasn't for her, it wasn't for any audience, it was for God. And he says before God, he is willing to become even more undignified, even more humiliated in his own eyes. And there's this fascinating little detail in how the text identifies her in this moment. It doesn't just say David's wife. It specifically calls her Saul's daughter. And that choice of words is intentional. It directly connects her cynical, prideful spirit back to her father Saul, the king who had disobeyed God and lost the kingdom. She just couldn't get David's heart for God. And the story ends with this really solemn, tragic conclusion. Because she despised the authentic worship she saw, the account says that Michal remained childless for the rest of her life. Which leaves us with this final lingering thought, this contrast between David and Michal. It just forces us to ask, what really is the difference between performing for an audience, living for public approval, and worshiping with a truly authentic heart? It's a question that defined a kingdom way back then, and honestly, it's just as relevant for all of us today.